Hi, Jeremy.
Hey, Bradley.
Hi, and thanks to everyone for joining today. Jeremy and I did a webinar back in May on the CPG industry and a few questions and challenges that are coming along. And since then, we've been delighted with a few more questions that have followed up since then. So we thought we would have a quick impromptu session where we can answer some of those questions. So the first question, I'll get going straight away. The first question is, what does being customer-centric really mean in today's market?
So I think that's a great question. I think a lot of people would have slightly different definitions, but from our standpoint, what it really means is if you're being really disciplined about implementing this, is that at every turn, you give the customer what they want. Whenever you are faced with a decision, you always choose the option that gives the customer the best possible experience. And this is really, really hard to do because the theory is that you might be faced with a challenge where there's a better experience on the left and maybe potentially more immediate revenue on the right. But the theory here is that if you choose the left, if you choose the better customer experience, you will actually make up that revenue in the long term by having customers who are more loyal, more engaged, more satisfied, and spreading the word of that experience more through word of mouth, et cetera. So really, if you can be this disciplined, you can actually really drive the needles quite a bit.
I think that some of the advantages of a customer-centric company is that one is that you understand the customer journey before, during, and after the sales process. The second is about improving the loyalty and reducing the churn. The third is improving sales and marketing, which is ultimately what every company wants to do. And then it should reduce the cost of supporting and serving customers as well. It obviously, by being more customer centric, it provides new product lines and more research into that as well. And I'm interested to see how more CPG companies are going to try and do that in the future as well through more social media interaction, and we've certainly helped some customers do that. I think going back to the question though, I think there is a balance to be had between being customer centric and being product centric. And for CPG companies, it's very difficult pulling out of that product centric mindset, but there's still some advantages to that as well.
Do you want to one quick thing I'd like to add to that. I do think also that when you do create that experience, you create a really, really compelling experience for your customers, and you've made those decisions almost at every turn to give them the best experience possible. It's very hard for your competitors to pull those customers away from you, right? They actually have to top or one up an experience that's already sort of at the top of its game, right? So, if you don't do that and you end up losing customers because you didn't make those decisions in the interest of the customers, somebody else is going to, and it's going to be very hard for you to get those customers back. Yeah, so I think it's a good lead into the second question. How do you know if your customer experience is worth experiencing? And I think from my perspective, I think there are two key metrics. First of all, if it's great, your customers will want to continue to experience it, right? So the sort of customer retention is going to be very high. You're not going to see significant drop off after your customers' first experiences with the brands, right? Second, I think if it's worth experiencing, your customers will want to share it. So in any way possible that you can measure your K factor or viral coefficient, whatever you want to call it, that's going to be a significant size of your customers. So, what percentage are they coming from social sharing? Because people don't like to share things that they don't strongly believe in, right? Their social reputation is sort of a currency online. And they'll really only share things that make them look good and have their reputation behind it.
Yeah, my answer would be to back that up and say that the sales should improve. Your revenue starts increasing. That's the obvious answer. And I think secondly, through that kind of combination of customer experiencing, pricing, and other factors, one of the amazing things about some of the modern omnichannel approaches is that you can measure that loyalty and that experience really accurately. Through the different channels, through the different retailers and different product lines as well.
Yep.
So the third question, how do you overcome the cultural resistance to change when starting to introduce an agile approach?
Yeah, so I think this is one that's right up your alley. I'd actually defer to you on this one. I think this is your expertise, but it's a great question.
Yeah, I think that the answer to that is that the benefits of moving to an agile approach should be so kind of common sense and natural. One is there should be no surprises due to the regular communication that you get in agile projects. Second is the regular improvements that leads to an agile approach, and that constant iterative improvements and visibility of that. And then the third thing is a much clearer understanding and seeing the evidence of the work that's been generated on the project as well. That's just as important, and I think I said this in the webinar, I think that's just as important on non-IT department agile approaches as it is to the IT development as well. There are some challenges which still remain. I think this first one is in the legal area. It's quite difficult writing an agile legal framework. It requires so much trust with a vendor because there's no specific outcome, there's no specific commitment other than actually supplying agile teams and what have you as well. Because as soon as you start promising an agreed date with an agreed specification and so forth, you're kind of putting too many fences around such an agile approach. So it does require that that trust. The second thing is that in some industries, in some areas, excuse me, in some areas, I'm not sure where the agile necessarily fits in. So I'm not sure I would want to take any agile developed drugs or fly in an agile designed aeroplane, for example. So although certain processes in those industries can apply for agile, there's certain design considerations in regulated industries that it's a bit more challenging than normal.
Yeah, and I think in CPG, it makes a lot of sense because you have an industry that's facing a lot of increasing challenges and different competitive landscape and changing consumers. And the idea that you can not only have an agile IT infrastructure, but also an agile process that allows you to create new products, test out new products, you know, in a much faster way before you actually go through the expense of bringing them to market, you know, validate that they're actually going to be successful and all of that is very, very critical. I think one of the things that's important is, from my standpoint, from the IT side, you know, to me, continuous improvement is something that comes along with an agile sort of mentality, right? So companies that see themselves with a huge legacy IT system and architecture and just kind of mess, which is frankly, from our standpoint, most companies, the way you sort of get around of having to face that or take that down again in 5 or 10 years is to build an agile team and an agile IT approach where you're continuously improving. That way you don't have to, you know, hit that massive wall again down the line when you've done when you have to do another complete refactoring of your entire architecture, right? Yeah, let's move on to the next question here. So a lot of consumers are becoming increasingly environmentally conscious. Can companies use apps to promote their sustainability programs and goals? I think this is also one that you might want to kick off.
So first of all, I'm delighted that that a sustainability question has come up. Certainly within Endava at the moment, we've got a few different sustainability programs going on. We've stopped using single-use plastics in a number of our offices, and we're rolling that out even further as well. Also started a recycling program a couple of years ago, and both the landfill and economic benefits are fantastic. Whether apps can improve these programs, I feel like it's a bit of a question, and we probably need to understand a bit more of a context. It probably depends on the company and the use, of course. I did see a viral video recently doing the rounds on LinkedIn from Corona, where they had designed some cans that twist together and then they can stack vertically, and that looked really good because there's been all sorts of research into how to connect multiple cans together. And one of the things I really liked about that was that the design for clicking them together is actually going to remain open source. They're not patenting it at all. So I thought that was really nice.
I do think this is a very relevant question also for CPG as well, because in our research, we've come across the idea that younger generations, millennials, Gen Z, et cetera, are willing to pay a premium for products that are environmentally responsible, right, and socially responsible. So we're glad to see that more CPG companies are asking these questions, and absolutely think it's important for them to focus on as part of their overall proposition to consumers.
Here. So final question is, what 3 features do you think are essential for direct to consumer or loyalty programs?
Sure. So from my standpoint, I think first you need a slam dunk proposition, right? I mean, you're asking customers to change the way they've purchased a product or a category of products for most of their lives. So, we know people fear change. They're too lazy to change. So you really need to convince them as to why they should change. So if I were, a company was looking to create a direct to consumer proposition, I think I'd ask myself, is the proposition that I'm thinking about or working on, is it at least 3 times better than the current experience, right? If there's a way to sort of quantify that, if you can test that out on a small audience, would they rate it as 3 times better than the current experience or 5 times better, right? How is it not just a better product, but a better experience that seamlessly fits into their lives and makes their lives easier? I think second, how is it personalized, right? Everybody always talks about personalization, but this will go a long way towards overcoming that behavioral change you're asking of customers. And then lastly, I think every feature needs to be presented in a way to the customer that demonstrates that you understand, what they want and what they need completely, right? What is the problem you're solving? What is important to this group of people? Is it quality? Is it price? Is it environmental sustainability, like we just talked about? If it's a subscription, let's say, how often do you know how often they need the product? It's not just how often the average person needs this product. How often does this individual need the product, right? So you really need to anticipate all of those needs and make it so they don't even need to think about it. You've just made their lives so much simpler and so much easier that it's a no-brainer for them.
Yeah, from my perspective, it's interesting that we've got slightly different approaches on this. From my perspective, I think for really good direct-to-consumer loyalty programs, number one is gamification. I think some of the best loyalty programs that are out there have got some amazing gamification built in, and I know we've done a few of those at Endava as well. It's always amazed me that we're so used to multi-tier loyalty programs on airlines, but we rarely see it in other loyalty programs. Usually they're kind of flat. Second is around simplification. It's got to be really easy to use it. We've all got so many different kind of cardboard or paper cards that we keep in our wallet, and it's just too difficult to keep them out, and then we end up keeping some at home or on our office desk, etc. Then we forget to use them, all that kind of stuff. It just feels very cumbersome at the moment, and it needs to be really simple. And then the third is the beneficial side. It's so obvious, but I think so many companies miss the step of understanding from the customer point of view, why do they want to keep on getting their card stamped or the electronic version stamped? Why do they want to use it? Why, when I walk into a coffee shop, for example, would I want to pay through the loyalty app compared to Apple Pay or whatever else? I think so. Those 3 things: there's gamification, simplification, and the benefit side as well. So So wrapping this up, any other thoughts on the CPG at this point, Jeremy?
I think we covered the questions that we had. Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
I think one of the challenges, and this has come out since the webinar, I think one of the challenges is around discovery. I think if you're a CPG company and you're manufacturing goods for a retailer to put on the shelves or electronically, that discovery of new products is really difficult. It's a real challenge. Still don't think that some of the user interfaces for commerce helps with discovery enough. It's so algorithm driven and so individual item driven. If you think about the last time you go to, in your case, a Walmart type store, and you see, because I know what it's like in the States, if you want to buy a ketchup or a mustard, etc., on the shelf, there's in the States 100 different varieties. You get to see it in your peripheral vision and vertically as well. But if you go onto the equivalent website, there's one item with a couple of alternatives and then an algorithm that's producing, and customers like you also bought this. I think that new product discovery is really, really hard. to get across. And then we've been circulating internally some of the latest internet trends report from Mary Meeker. And one of the interesting points is that still only 15% of retail trade is done online to consumers. And that's really interesting. Crazy. That shows the growth that still is available. And I'm sure, globally, Amazon and some other local retailers seem to have such a large footprint, but it's still only 15% of the retail industry.
Wow. That's a pretty sobering metric.
Which just shows the kind of opportunities still available. So if anyone's got any other questions, you can contact us. We have set up a new email address at ihaveaquestion@endava.com, and hopefully in the post-production they're going to add that as a title. So it's ihaveaquestion@endava.com, and if you mark it as a CPG question, then Jeremy and I can help answer it.
So and then Jeremy, to add on to that, oh, sorry. I was just going to add, you can also look up Bradley Howard and myself, Jeremy Mays, on LinkedIn. I think we'll also add our LinkedIn profile at the bottom as well. But yeah, it's been a pleasure, Bradley.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. Keep well, and please send us any more questions.
You too. Thank you, everybody, for watching.